All right, bows and bow ties. I just want to say it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Um, and the reason why I can say that is because I can breathe today. I took the right medication. I took the Zyrtec or the no frills version. Yesterday, I took a Claritin and I was all kinds of messed up. My face was balled up. My sinuses were balled up. Everything was bad. I got the windows down. The air feels good. Thank you. Almost fall, but not really. It's 54 degrees, right? 55 degrees, something like that outside right now. The air is airing. So, yes. So, before I start talking about what I want to talk about, can I just say the shrinkage is real? I know I need to do something with my hair. I just haven't decided what I'm going to do yet. I know I've been wearing this same style for about a week, week and a half now, about a week or so. Look, I got stuff going on. So I guess I should roll up the window so there isn't so much background noise. And I will do. Well, let me do this. All right. Put the AC on. Hold on. All right. So I want to talk about femininity for a second. And people seems to be hyper focused on black femininity. On the one hand, you've got men trying to tell women how to be feminine. I'm like, you don't get to tell women how to be feminine, right? You get to tell them what you like. It doesn't mean they're going to follow. You've got women who have, it's like a whole big grift. You've got women out here. Where do I begin? Okay, let's just start with, let's get the men out the way and then I'll focus on the women part. You've got men who are talking about how they want feminine women. The problem is they are feminine. The men are feminine. And so they want women to be more feminine than they are. And I'm like, wait a second. Why can't you focus on getting the men together, checking the men? Check the men. That's what's going on. Now, I'm getting ready to say something that's a little inflammatory, and I know you guys are going to be mad, but I want you to lean in for a second. Now, look, you're not going to like this, but dudes that look like me, like outside of sports or something, y'all just underperform collectively on a whole, like worse than everybody all the time. You're last in everything, right? And I say this, I'm being a little bit shady, but there's a little bit of love there too, meaning like you're always last to get on board with something because I feel like there's so much low self-esteem and wanting to be something else other than what you are. And so you're subscribing to ideals that don't suit you. And you're easily influenced. They always say when you want to get people on your side, you try to go after some of the poorest people, right? You give them a cause, you give them their cause, give them their family unit, right? That's why you have gangs. That's why you have like these large groups of people in these like pockets around the world where they're part of like a jihadist movement or whatever, right? You give some of the most worst off people or whatever, or you indoctrinate them with something, and then the rest is history. And they typically are a lot of brown people. Now, look, I don't think women should be listening to men on how to be feminine. There is no man really, and I say this tongue in cheek, there's exceptions to every rule, but men can't tell you how to be feminine. They can tell you what they're attracted to, but half the time they don't even understand what they're attracted to. It's like they want women to be hyper feminine because they are feminine. So it's like, well, where can women go? Well, be more feminine because I don't know how to be masculine, whatever that means, right? So this is why I find these channels to be ridiculous when men are talking about how women should be feminine. They should be focused on how to be masculine. I don't know why men are so hyper focused on femininity, especially black women's femininity. It's so weird and creepy. I don't understand this. I didn't grow up like that. None of the men that I knew growing up were focused on women's femininity. They were more focused on being men. Now, I'm just calling a thing a thing. Now, don't get mad at me. Get mad at somebody else and argue with yourself. So for people to get out here, now a lot of it's for clicks and views. A lot of it's because they want to be inflammatory and that way it gets people talking. But there's a reason why there's so many men out here talking about femininity. And I'm like, what do you know about femininity unless you're practicing? And even still, you can only do but so much, right? You can only impersonate the femininity so much. But before I get on the women, I just want to like wrap up the men's portion. It is really weird and creepy that you have these large groups of men getting out here on Jesus's internet talking about black femininity. These men, I'm going to make my points clear again. Number one, they should be focused on how to be masculine and however you want to define masculinity. Stop being weird and hyper focusing on black femininity. Two, I think feminine is because they already are feminine, more feminine, so they appear to be masculine. When I was growing up, like I never really saw the men have to say, "Oh, I am a man." Like I've never. They just were. Like they just took care of the families. I'm not saying we didn't have dysfunction in my family because I have a whole dysfunctional. The dysfunction is real, just like the shrinkage is real on my hair. Okay, so I'm not saying that we didn't have dysfunction. We have all look. I have all kinds of stories about my dysfunctional family, but nevertheless, they never focused on telling women how to be feminine. They were more focused on how, I guess they never actually named it, but being masculine. So it's really weird and creepy that I see like these guys out here putting out this content. I'm like, why are you hyper focused on black femininity? You shouldn't be. Because if you were focused on your masculinity, you wouldn't have time for femininity. Usually when you have a purpose for something, you don't have time for the extraneous, right? You don't have time for it. So stop talking about it. Okay. So now that I finished going on and on about the men, I want to focus on the women for a second because y'all are really clowning. Hold on, let me set my coffee. You can tell I'm feeling good about myself. I've got some like menthol rub on my nose, and yeah, I can breathe. So listen, the women out here need to stop. I feel like number one, I feel like what we're doing is we're not really talking about the essence of femininity. We are almost cosplaying some ridiculous ideal of femininity, right? So if you notice, many of the women, they want to give this appearance of being soft and friendly. So you'll see them talk like this and they never raise their voice and they tend to talk like a robot in my opinion. And so this is the thing. I don't think femininity is synonymous with sounding like this. Now, there are women who sound that way, right? And there are, believe it or not, there are times in my natural voice, because I feel like I'm yelling, and my natural voice, I may sound like that, but I don't go out of my way to talk like this. It's so weird. Like, you know, um, and my natural voice is actually deeper in my opinion, right? Even though I feel like I'm talking normal, but like obviously I'm trying to make a point. I'm making a lot of declaratives and that type of thing. But the point I'm making is when you're telling women that they have to be a certain way, it just sounds like we want you to be something other than who you are because what you are is not good enough. So the thing that makes you you, the way you talk or anything like that. Now I can understand if you're saying like you don't want to always be combative all the time. That I would agree with that, right? Like I don't typically like to get into a whole lot of arguments with men. I mean, we can debate a topic, but even still, I don't like arguing with men. And I'm going to tell you the reason why. One, if we had to yell, which you shouldn't have to yell, but I don't think yelling is always bad in an argument. But it just means most people aren't going to hear you if you're trying to make a point. But if you have to yell, I'm not going to compete with the bass of a man's voice, right? Like, I can't compete with that. I'm not going to be able to out yell them. I don't want to. Number two, it's just kind of weird. Like, you want to just argue all the time. I don't. Like, I just don't want to do that. But you've got women out here in these streets telling women, so don't argue with men, which I agree with that, but like, and you have to talk like this, almost as if you have to make yourself very demure, very cutesy, for those of you who know why I said that trend that's going on. It's almost like you have to make yourself a non-threat as much as possible. So what they're doing is like, you want to make yourself small, you want to like make your voice sound almost childlike sometimes. I don't agree with that. I feel like, just talk. Okay, you don't have to attack, but you can talk. I'm pretty sure most people, when they're listening to me, so I don't have a high pitched voice, but you can tell the difference between my voice and like my husband's or another guy. They'd be like, hey, good morning, whatever, right? You can tell the difference. I don't have to walk around and talk like this. Number one, it does not serve me to be that way every day. Even though when I'm speaking in meetings, I'm obviously a little bit more demure than most people, because I find that when I'm speaking more like this, men will listen, but I don't have to talk like this. Just because I think the pitch of my voice sounds different than most men in a meeting, right? So oftentimes if I'm speaking, you might hear, so like, I'm not trying to sound like a child, but I will take it down to a level so that they can hear me. But I don't want to talk like this and breathy. That is the most ridiculous thing. That is not necessarily femininity. Number two, the women who are out there, for the person who's joining in late, I already got on about the weirdo men being hyper focused on it and my reasons why, but I'm talking about the women now. With the women, so I talked about the voice. This is the other thing that I'm noticing. I am noticing that Black femininity is so rooted in European beauty standards, and it's so weird. So, for example, if you notice, all the ones who are having these conversations, they all look the same. They all got the same bust down wig, the same makeup, and the eyebrows and the lashes. And all. Everybody has to look the same. So what they're doing is they're creating this aesthetic that says, if you want to be considered beautiful and feminine and all these other things, you must look like this. And you must have a bust down wig, weave, or whatever it is, right? Their concept of glam, you would not see them put on like a kinky, or wear a kinky fro, or like even kinky hair extensions, or a kinky whatever, right? They're not doing that. Okay, I may or may not get some sketchy like service for like the next mile or so, because I'm taking a back road. It's really pretty back here, by the way. So their concept of what they're saying femininity is, it's something that now all these women are trying to ascribe to, that doesn't fit their natural features anyway. Women are out here wearing blonde wigs. And now, before you guys come for me and say, like, well, the original people in Africa, they had blonde hair too. That is correct. But most of the people in the phenotype of a typical Black American or Black person worldwide, the typical phenotype of a Black person is not one with blonde hair. Let's be for real. And we're going to call a thing a thing. So, yes, I know light skin, different hair textures, different colors, and everything came from Black people, but the average Black person does not have blonde hair. And I'm not saying you can't have blonde hair. So now you've got women out here burning up all their hair. Women have no edges now. I mean, we got to talk about Edgegate in a second, but like, they have no edges out here with all these bust down wigs, trying to compete for a population of men that look like them, that don't want what they are anyway. They don't want that anyway, right? You're trying to compete like a European standard. They want something more European. That's not you. You need to go ahead and compete with yourself. Like, you need to be the standard for the men who are okay with who you are. So, for example, I understand if you're trying to get like some athlete or something, right? A lot of them are already mentally conquered, so we're not going to go there, right? But yes, they're looking for a certain aesthetic. I get it. But if you're looking for a guy that actually likes women who look like you, focus on looking like you. So you got all these women out here having all these feminine standards, femininity channels telling you that you have to talk like this. And then they're having, like, if you look at the aesthetic that they're promoting, right? Keep in mind, people are going to complain that, oh, black men don't want black women's natural looks. I do think that's true, by the way. Doesn't help that they're also promoting the very same thing that they really want to run away from. They're trying to, they're promoting black women are beautiful only when you have a 24-inch bust down weave or wig or whatever, and your lashes look like plates, and you are wearing 25 pounds of makeup. Now, for the record, I want to make sure I say this clearly so I'm not sounding like a hypocrite. I also think that is beautiful too. But what's happening is this notion of femininity is being co-opted by a particular aesthetic. So it's I chose to have that conversation while my hair is all twisted up. I don't know, right? Like, the shrinkage is real. It doesn't mean that I can't go get my hair professionally done and wear it straight. I haven't done that in probably 2 or 3 years, to be honest. I'm terrible at doing my own hair. I mean, I'm okay, but I need to get a professional done. The point I'm making is these black femininity channels, it's like the biggest grift. What they're doing is they're playing off of all of these women's insecurities. You got women out here edgeless. I mean, it's like truly like edgegate. It's like an epidemic. I'm calling it edgegate. Edgegate. What happened to the edges? It's like Marco Polo. I mean, we got to come up with a name for the edges. Um, but it's going to be called Micro Polo. I don't know. So, like, this is what's happening now. So now they're telling you to talk like this, which is not even in your natural voice. Just don't be argumentative. I get that. Like, I don't feel like arguing all the time. Maybe it's because I'm old and worn out. I don't know. I'm 48. But, so this car is just going to act like he doesn't see me trying to, like, merge. I'm like, move your hind parts over. Don't be a jerk. All right. I digress. So, now there's that. So, these women are out here playing on black women and their insecurities. They're playing out here on their insecurities. So then, this is the thing that throws me off. We sit here and we are the curators of culture. We start trends and everything else. And instead of like embracing who we are, we're trying to be something else. And then the something else is actually co-opting what we've got going on in our culture. Check this out. I was actually watching something on another podcast. It's so funny. I think was it the two white ladies I like to watch? I think it was on the I've Had It podcast. I can't remember. They cracked me up. And no, maybe it wasn't them. I don't know what podcast it was, but it was a white woman, and she brought up a point. She said, in white women world, it's really interesting how, like, we would never be caught out in a full wig. So they just do the hair extensions, right? I mean, I see people all the time with hair extensions. I don't think it's a big deal. But in black culture, it's almost as if like they're trying to do the very things that, how do I explain this? The very things that we've started with the wigs and the weaves and the tapings and everything like that, they're doing it too. They don't realize we've already started that whole trend. And it's been, actually, this thing has been going on for years. It's been done in Africa. It's been done in Europe. Everybody thinks that Europe is the only one wearing wigs. In Africa, they were wearing wigs. Long, long time ago. But it's not just that. It's like, I noticed, like, if you go online, I actually saw this actually morph. Black women have been lining their lips for years with their makeup, right? My mom was doing that for years. Years. Okay? And now all of a sudden, I remember last year there was an Asian lady got on and said, like, you should not be lining your lips and don't be like black women. I wish I could find that clip. I saw it on TikTok. And now I see all the white women and everybody else out here lining their lips. They're doing the lip stain, peeling it off, lining the lips. And I'm like, I just feel like black women don't even understand. Like, oh my goodness, like, you create this culture and you're trying to run away from your culture. You created this baddie aesthetic, right? People went and bought bodies to match this aesthetic. They wanted to have the tiny waist and the hips and the badonk and all. That's a cool term. I haven't used that word in like forever. The curvature and in the back area. The situation that was happening in the back. All of that was happening. and you had it naturally. Then you had to go ruin it and get BBLs, and now I don't know. I think I digress. Let me reel this back in. The point I was making was Black women who are out here on the internet talking about femininity are trying to, number one, they're telling you to talk a certain way. They're telling you basically they're creating this aesthetic that is so ridiculous, which is completely exclusive, right? They're basically showing you better than they can tell you that the way to femininity is a bust down with a ton of makeup and eyelashes, and they all look the same. Look at how those housewives look. All of them. Every single one of them. Their notion of glam is not themselves. Their notion of glam is if I over contour my nose and make it smaller and get my weave, that's beautiful. My situation is not beautiful, but something else is. And that's what they're promoting. And then instead of saying, hey, femininity looks like a lot of things, it looks like, bust downs, because I think that's beautiful too. There's nothing wrong with a bust down. I just have a problem when you're promoting that as the standard for femininity. But instead of saying who you are and what you look like, that's also feminine, right? You have other things going for yourself other than your ability to lose your edges. I just feel like they are playing on the insecurities on women. I think it's one of the biggest grifts out there. They're telling you, oh, and let me tell you, quiet as it's kept. I want you to listen to this. Black femininity channels, I feel like it's also exclusive because it's almost like promoting the woman who has access to disposable funds. I want you to let that one sink in for a second. Because if you look at how they want you to decorate your home and you have to travel, like you guys listen to me travel a lot or talk about traveling a lot, right? Well, I saved up my 3 pennies, put them in the piggy bank, and we work certain things and then we break open the piggy bank to travel. But that is a hobby of mine. But I also am cognizant that that's something that you need, like a couple of extra dollars of disposable money. That is not everyone's reality. So I want to make this clear. But when you look at what they're promoting, it is very expensive to be feminine. And I'm sitting here thinking like we need to stop, because I look at whether you're in the hood or whether you're in the suburbia or whether you're in the country, femininity looks like a lot of things. It looks like a lot of things. But I don't like what's being promoted out there. So then when I circling back to the men, when they're talking about Black women need to be more feminine, I'm like, what do you know about femininity? What do you know about femininity? You know what you like or what you're attracted to, but what can you talk to about the essence of femininity? Femininity is not something that you achieve by saying, okay, I got my bust down and I did this, like, and now you checked all the boxes and now you're feminine. Because I can go get my hair professionally done, blown out, add in some, I don't know, hair tracks or whatever, and do all those things and can put on all the makeup in the world. And if, depending on the environment, I can still be perceived as lacking in femininity. I want to make it clear. And I'll give you an example. I work in a very male dominated field. And depending on my energy level, it depends on how hard I want to uh, go hard for a particular topic. So last week, a coworker of mine, he made me laugh. And he's like, hey, I noticed that you're not speaking up in the meetings lately. I said, I'm tired. I don't like to argue. I don't. I very rarely want to do that type of thing. I can tell you what the question, what the thing was, right? And I'm going to bore you. So I'll explain in a minute. Long story short, we were working on requirements, okay? And people were getting wrapped around the axle. They were making these very emotional requirements, and requirements are not emotional. And then they were talking about KPI. So those of you who are not familiar with a KPI in engineering world or any, it doesn't even mean engineering. A KPI is a key performance indicator. So long story short, they were like, we need to have KPIs for this, that, and the other. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, that's not a KPI. So after a week, because I never said anything in the meeting because I don't want to be bothered. I'm like, look, you like it, I love it. Look, because you're not going to listen anyway. Someone mentioned to me, they said, hey, why didn't you say something? I know you know what it is. I'm like, I don't feel like arguing with these people. So the following week, which was this past week, I said something in a meeting. So this is when I know I may or may not be perceived as feminine. And at this point in time, it won't matter what I'm wearing, what my hair looks like, or whatever. I said in the meeting, I said, I think we need to take a step back because we are conflating the difference between a metric and a KPI. And they were like, well, these are KPIs. I'm like, that is not a KPI. And I had to explain the difference between a metric and a KPI. Do you know this was jaw dropping? Okay. They were like, I mean, mouth was agape. Agape, all the way agape. So what happened was people looked at me and then they wanted to ignore it. And then I just sat back. And then it came up again to me. I said, that is not a KPI. Now, the first time I said it, I was a little bit more like, okay, this is what we need to do. I had to be very affirmative. I wasn't yelling, but men don't typically take well when you're in a whole room full of them. And it's like, I'm like the lone one. Sometimes people don't handle that well. The second time I spoke up, I may have been considered more demure. I literally said, that is not a KPI again. And then what happened was I took a real system or whatever it was we were working on, and I gave an example. They looked again. They looked again. Where am I going with that? Women who are out here promoting what is considered feminine, I'm telling you right now, the essence of femininity is not something that you check off on the box. Because even if I had all of those qualities, depending on the scenario, if I speak up and I'm like, that's absolutely not the case, me saying that can be perceived as lacking in femininity. She's telling a man that's not a, I mean, I knew I was 100% right. I mean, because I am who I am. I mean, I'm just saying. But I was just like, no, that's not what it is. Now, when I had those conversations, and of course I'm leaving some stuff out because you don't need to know all the gory detail. Someone was like, I know a lot of times they don't listen, but you know what? Someone said, the way you speak, your voice still carries differently. It sounds different from a man's. So I came out, I was a little bit more, I don't want to say aggressive, but I had to be aggressive. They still didn't listen. But even still, I sounded different than a man. These women who are telling you what femininity is, it is a total grift. They're grifting off of these women's insecurities. I mean, like, I don't understand. Why are we moving at 17 miles an hour here? Like, I'm just trying to understand what is going on. Anyway, they're grifting off of a whole bunch of women and their insecurities. They're telling them to get bust down weeds and everything. They're telling them to talk like this. Let me tell you, there are times if I talk like that, I will not be heard, at least not in the profession that I'm in. People want to talk over me all the time. And I'm like, I'm not trying to argue with you, but I said what I said. So now people get it. Like, I'm like, I don't argue. I said exactly what I said. Do what you want. Do what you want. But this is what I said. The end. And that's it. People will try to say, that's not what's happening. I'm like, that's literally what's happening because I was just working on this last week. It's literally what's happening. But I don't feel the need to argue with you. Anyway, I know I was a little all over the place, but I just wanted to get that off my chest because I feel like culturally, you got men out here trying to tell women what femininity is. And I'm like, you don't know what it is. You know what you're attracted to. You're attracted to a particular aesthetic or a type of woman, but you can't tell what is feminine. You can't coach women on being feminine. You can't coach women on being feminine any more than I can coach somebody on how to be masculine. And I'm telling you right now, some of what it is to be feminine or masculine is learned through societal heuristics. Okay, boys and girls? And I'm not trying to be that person just dropping words, but and for those of you who don't know what a heuristic is, heuristics. Heuristics. Those are the things that are learned over time, right? It's kind of like when you're out among a group of people, or for those of us who look like me, when you go out into like the corporate world, we naturally know how to code switch, and there's certain behaviors, or things that you're going to do at work. Those are learned over time. It's not something that you're going to write in a book. Right? Like we used to joke about like how like if you would see another black person and you're saying hello, and another person go, oh, how's it going? And how's the weather? Or blah blah blah. When there was more than two or three of us congregated, we would break it up. We were like, oh, we got to break it up. The census is too high. I use the word the census is too high, right? Those are the things because what happens is that at times people start looking and wondering what's going on over there. Do you see what I mean? Like there's those little nuances. That's a heuristic, something that you learn over time. You know how to maneuver, behave, etc. So when you talk about femininity and masculinity, there are certain things you learn over time, and it's through just being around people. It's not like a factual thing, right? It's learned through experiences. These people who are telling you like this is what you need to do to be feminine or masculine, and this isn't something that you check off. You're around people like little things like it's just hard to explain. Like even like when women or when okay, for example, I'll give you an example. Now, I'm not a man, but this is just a really bad example. It's kind of like when you're out dating somebody, right? And if you're alone, just the two of you, assuming we're talking about heteronormative relationships, right? I can't speak to the LGBT, all the letters and how this works. I'm talking about man and woman. Can, cisgender, since we gotta like identify everything. When men are talking to women, right? Especially when they're really like into you, or if they're trying to flex their masculinity. This isn't like something where they certainly go to their book and they say, pull out the deep voice, right? They don't do that. At this point in time, you must lower your voice and talk like, no, that's something that's going to happen when you're talking to somebody and talking to someone, and the situation's going to call for you to drop the level of your voice if you're trying to Mac or something. I don't know. I know these are all words. This isn't something where they say, now, when you're in this moment, you're going to talk more like this. Like, I can't do what they're doing, but that's something you learn over time. You learn over time, like the kinds of things like how when if a woman is trying to impress, not impress, but if she's showing her interest, they're not going to say at this point in time go flip your hair. Absolutely not. Or there's nuance to like when you're leaning in, when you lean away, when who is blowing me up. Okay, so like those things happen. That's a heuristic. Where am I going with this? Femininity and masculinity is not something that you're going to check off in the box. Men shouldn't be telling women how to be feminine. They don't know how to be feminine. They barely know how to be masculine. They're way too hyper focused on femininity. It's really weird, really creepy, and I think the women need to stop, having all these grifts and profiting off of all of these women's insecurities. They're literally telling women that they need to talk like this. And they all sound the same and they all look the same. I wonder how many of them are in these desired pick me relationships. Now, I know you're going to be like, how dare you speak? You're married. Yes, I am. What I didn't do was walk around talking like this all the time and wearing a bust down with tons of makeup and eyelashes. And there's nothing wrong with those things, but that's what they're promoting. All right. So don't be mad at me. Be mad at whoever it is that you're following on Jesus's internet. And I'm just calling thing a thing. And also, while I'm on my little bit of a rant, let me just say, all of you who are out here in podcast land listening to these whacked out weirdos, that's men and women, get off of these podcasts. Most of these people don't even have a relationship that can hold any water. They're trying to talk to you about marriage and they've never been married. You've got men trying to tell women how to catch a man. Men don't know how to catch men unless you're playing for the same team that I'm playing for. You can tell women what men want. At the end of the day, only women can tell women how to catch men. Hey, I said what I said. These are my opinions. That's why they call me the black opinionated woman. Hey, My opinion may change tomorrow. I'm allowed to do that because they're my opinions. All right. So I'm just going to be mad at this traffic for another 5 or 10 more minutes before I should arrive at my destination. What time is it? I don't even know what time it is. Oh, yeah, I got about 10 minutes. Um, I'm curious to know what your thoughts are. I'm sure there's going to be somebody in my comments that's going to be unhinged, and it is what it is. But yeah, that's it. I'm going to get off now. I'm rambling. Have a good one.